Should Scott Morrison resign from Parliament?
Well, I'm no fan of his, so I'm not sure that my view would be, I guess you'd have to take my view with a grain of salt. That's up to him. But again, what the Royal Commission says about him is humiliating and embarrassing. Now, to be fair, he totally says it's all wrong. The problem is that if you read that whole Royal Commission and you read all of the things that are said, you got one bloke saying it's all wrong and everyone else saying that Robodebt was all wrong. I mean, how does Mr Morrison really exculpate himself? He was the Social Services Minister when the most shameful chapter in the public administration of social security and law in Australian history was launched. He was the Treasurer promising in successive budgets that there was this mountain of gold which had been taken inappropriately by people on welfare, which was non-existent. And then as Prime Minister, he used to say, oh, well, we're just doing what the previous governments did. And the Royal Commission says that's a complete falsehood. So I don't know. Obviously, what he sees in the mirror is different to what other people see.
There seems a pattern now of Royal Commissions into past governments' misdeeds, with each new federal government holding one. The Abbott government had the Pink Bats Royal Commission, for example, which again examined government actions leading to people dying. Does it take some of the momentum or the integrity off the perception of these things, that there is a perception there's an element of political square-up or political advantage in calling these things?
You can read and write, Andrew. Just read the Royal Commission report. We didn't invent Robodebt. Labor didn't ask for them to do it. In fact, repeatedly we asked for them to stop it. We didn't ask Mr Morrison to take an unlawful idea to the Coalition Cabinet. We didn't ask the Coalition Cabinet to embrace an unlawful idea. We didn't ask them for 4.5 years to ignore all the red flags, the advocates, the harm. We didn't ask them to pay Price Waterhouse for a report that they never got, the final version. We didn't ask them to ignore the advice that there was a warning that 95% of the debts could be inaccurate. We didn't ask them to oppose nearly 20,000 internal appeals by people who received robodebts. We didn't ask them to not reappoint Terry Carney at the AAT after he had blown the whistle on Robodebt. We didn't ask them to oppose 4,339 external AAT matters. This is not another day at the office. The Dutch government, when they got their social security laws wrong in the way they were applying it to a smaller group of people in the Netherlands, resigned. This government would just have you think that there's not very much to see here. And, you know, they're all... I mean, what is the coalition defence? The ministers just were too stupid to know what was going on.
Paul Keating's comments on Anthony Albanese's visit to NATO, what do you make of those?
I'm pleased that Prime Minister Albanese is attending NATO. He's been invited. We should take an interest in the world. I think it's important that NATO realises that other freedom-loving countries around the world are equally opposed to the illegal Russian war against Ukraine. And so I think it's very timely to show Australia's support for a democratic nation being illegally invaded by Putin and the renaissance of Russian imperialism and fascism.
Now, Claire O'Neill's a friend of yours in the caucus, but she made a blue over this Donald Trump Jr. tweet, didn't she, the other day?
I think Claire is fabulous. I think she's an outstanding minister and she's doing great work fixing up the mess left to us in immigration and her portfolio of home affairs. I have to say, I remember in 2016, Malcolm Turnbull said that it was the end of the world when I uttered words on Darwin FM radio. I said that some of Donald Trump Sr.'s views were barking mad, and that apparently made me unfit for office, according to Mr Turnbull. Well, I think President Trump's views, some of them have turned out to be incredibly extreme. So I'm not about to get into the I don't pretend I live in a glass house. I'm not going to throw rocks at any colleagues.
How are you feeling about the Fadden by-election on the weekend?
Oh, I think the LNP will win it. I think if Stuart Robert was their candidate, I think then there could be an upset. But he, of course, has left town, ridden out on his horse. I think I just assume the LNP will be ahead. But Letitia Del Fabro, our candidate, nurse educator, she the voters of Fadden would be, they'd be doing a lot better than the previous LNP chap they had by voting for her. But I think there might be a bit of ingrained LNP, just whatever. And I also think that Stuart Roberts' departure has probably made it slightly easy for the LNP to hold that seat.
Just finally, a question on NDIS. You suggested last week it was not the end of the world if the government didn't meet its cap in growth of 8%. Do you stand by that comment?
Yeah, I should have picked my words more carefully. It's a target, not a cap, but the government's completely committed to reforming the scheme, and I believe our reforms, which put participants first, will deliver a reduction in growth to about 8%.
Bill Shorten, thanks so much for your time this afternoon.
Lovely to chat.